Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Big day in the DFS NASCAR. We've got the Coca Cola 600 today. Joining me this week with this nice afternoon time slot we got fitted in here is Dane Chenault. How's it going today?
Going good. One of my favorite races of the year for sure. Like you were mentioning in chat, the longest race of the year. So it's always a fun one on Memorial Day weekend to sit back, watch. I know a couple guys are watching the Indy 500 and flip right Coke 600.
Yeah, it's a hell of a day, that's for sure. If you like racing, I didn't get a chance to watch the F1 even. That was
Coke
probably on
600.
really early this morning, I believe. But I wasn't up for that. So I'm just going to share this in a few spots. I know some have notifications set up where they are going to get this link immediately when we go live, but I will just share it in a couple other places. NASCAR show is live. All right, so there's one down. Good thing I preloaded all the messages. Just going to drop the link in every week. I still haven't figured out how to go and like take the show and schedule it so that all we have to do is me and you connect and then it goes. Yeah, no, I can't get that to work. I've got another account that I that I practice on to try and get things set up. Yeah, it's been like months of trying to get this to work the way I want, but whatever. We get to sit here and jabber on for 2 minutes while I share it all. While a few people get in, we'll see. We got about 7 or 8 in here now. We'll let that go up a few minutes before we really dive into the content here today. Like I said, we've got a later lock time. I believe it is 6 o'clock Eastern this week. Another thing to note about this race, they qualified yesterday, so pretty awesome. We get practice and qualifying 2 weeks in a row. Absolutely amazing. I love building these models around some of these practice times, and this week's even a little bit better than last week, just simply because they practiced in the rain last week. The race was in the rain, so we didn't. That data really didn't tell us a whole lot, I guess you could say, as much as it did this week. Did you get to watch any practice for qualifying?
Yeah, I watched a little bit of practice. I did not get to watch qualifying, but yeah, it's always nice when we get a little bit more data to look at heading into Sunday. And this week we got a few more hours to digest it even. So
And then the other thing with qualifying was because this is an impound race, meaning after they did the tech before qualifying yesterday, they went through qualifying. So any changes, they can't make any changes. The cars are impounded in the garage until today. They open them up. They can go. If they do have to make a change, they go to the rear on pace laps. So what we've seen in qualifying, because you start with the setup that you obviously qualify in, and that kind of gives us little bit different dynamic as well. Is of course all the top teams are going to be going for the pole. They're going to be trimmed out, running for the pole for the most part. We see some of these mid pack to back end cars that really aren't going for the pole, and they know that they're probably going in qualifying. We did see some of them. I know Cole Custer was one of them. They were talking about like lap 30 or 40. Boyer was talking about on TV how he's going to have a lot of downforce, which is good over the long runs, not good on a qualifying run. So we can tell a lot of those cars out there yesterday were running in, I would say, like race trim versus qualifying trim. Have you looked any into that, or just being that it's a long race? I'm myself not, looking at okay, well, this guy was in race trim, so I'm not really gonna, weigh his qualifying and where he qualified because it is a very long race, and that is one thing that's very unique about this. We have 4 stages in this race, so keep that in mind. It's a very it's like 4 to 5 hours long. This is one heck of a night here. Starts in the day, the track changes and goes into the night. So there's a lot of variables in this race. So myself, long story short, I'm not completely looking at that sort of narrative. Um, I do think it's a long ride. We have seen this in the past. Brad Keselowski last year was like average run position of like 11th or 12th throughout the whole entire race until the final stage. I believe there was a crash. He worked his way, got some track position, led the final 21 laps, and won the race. So, being that it's a long race can benefit those guys. How are you looking at it for like overall strategy type stuff?
yeah, so it looks like the Joe Gibbs cars were definitely not trimmed or in qualifying trim. They were definitely in race trim with the highest guy, Truex, qualifying eighth. Kyle Busch looked really good in practice on the long runs. So, and he qualified 20th. So we'll get to him when we start talking about individual plays. But like you said, it's a really long race. The track changes. You're going to see guys who are good early, first half of the race in the heat. And then when it gets dark and cools down a little bit, you could even see that completely flip and a different guy has a better car. So it's definitely, you need multiple dominators. I think we have seen a couple races in the last 5 years that have ended up being one main dominator with Truex, and I think Kyle Busch did the same thing in this race, even though it's so long.
Yeah.
But you're going to see, I would build around 2 to 3 at least dominators in this race. I'm not built yet, my 20 max, but I'm leaning toward trying to get a lot of 3 dominator builds if I can. The third one, obviously probably not going to be able to jam in 3 of the top guys, but there's some guys in the mid range that I think can dominate as well that you could build around as your third dominator there for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely something I'm looking at. And then something I also did today was just instead of just looking at, and you'll see if you're looking at the sheet, anyone, we're going to jump into the sheet here shortly. But you can see that I labeled the races Coca Cola 600s, and the other ones are just the simple, or not the simple, but it would be the playoff race at Charlotte. So I really started diving in and looking at that data from a DraftKings perspective. So one thing I am looking at, like the perfect lineup last year, was Truex, McDowell, Custer, Blaney, Bowman, and Elliott. So you had one in the mid. Truex was about 10.5, 10.6, I believe, last year. Bowman and Elliott were in that mid 9K range, and then Blaney was an 8K guy, Custer 6K, and McDowell was 5,600, which was awesome value for that last year. They scored 405 points, 8.1x on that lineup. So I just broke down the Coca Cola 600s alone. So that one was 405 points in 2019. The Coca Cola 600, 422 points. That's 8.5x. And when I talk about X, that's just taking the salary, which is 50,000 on DraftKings, and times in that by 5 to get your, or sorry, times in that by how many points. So you take your points, 422 and a half DraftKings points, divide that by your salary, and times it by 1,000, and that gives you 8.5. So just kind of looking at when you're using the matrix, how to really assess what you're going to need. This is GPP winning lineups, these scores. I would say to cash, you're probably looking at more like 6 to 7x at this race. It is different because it is very long. We've got what, 400 laps, 400-mile-and-a-half laps here. So I agree with you, 2 to 3 dominators. I think so far I've got set up. I've got 2 guys over 100, one really dominating, not over 200 though, and then I'm thinking that we're going to probably see about 5, maybe 6 guys over 20, and like at least probably 3 or 4 over like 40. With like I said, 2 over 100 is kind of the way I'm looking at it. I've got that over on the matrix there. So now that we've got a few more people in here, I'm going to, let's jump over and we'll have a little look at the sheet, and we'll really break it down from a driver's perspective here. So just let me share my screen. Go over here. Share that. And I think we are there. Yes, so I got the sheet up here. So yeah, going and looking at the matrix, I will slide over and we'll look at that tab here. I have added a new couple rows here, the request of a few people. So some people just wanted the simple calculation of how many points each driver needs to hit 5, 6, 7x on DraftKings. And I left 4x out on this race just because we do have 400 laps. We do see higher scores. So we are going to need at least 5x to 5x. I don't think if you have 5x in your whole entire lineup, which would be what, 250 points, I don't think that's going to get you in GPP cash. I think you're going to need 6x, which is going to put you around 300 points, and even pushing that 7x. And then tournament winning again, you're going to be looking 7 to 8, even upwards of 9, depending on the scores really changed. When we look back to 2017, or sorry, the 2018 Coca Cola 600, that's the one that Kyle Busch really dominated. I think he led 380 laps, 390 laps. The score was very high. I'm just going to check my notes here real quick. 462 points, 9.2x you needed on that. And it was made possible because obviously he made up for almost 50% of those points. Like it was something like 43% of the DK points in the total overall winning lineup was made up by Kyle Busch. The same thing happened, like you said, with Martin Truex the years before. I don't think we see that race today. I really don't. I think we see a little bit more balance. So for me at the top, the big question I have to ask you, first of all, is Kyle Larson, Martin Truex Jr., both over 11K, both over 14K on FanDuel, 11K on DraftKings. of those two, have you really been able to narrow down? I can make arguments for both these guys, but I want to hear your opinion on them first. Yeah.
Yeah, 20 max. I'm going to be probably split evenly on the two, and I will make some lineups with both of them because I think you can do it. The only problem I see with doing it is that once you lock those two guys into a lineup, the way you have to build is going to be chalky for that specific construction. So I will have a few in that with both of them, but if I had to choose one, I think I got to go Truex right now. Just the way this race has been pretty much his over the last 5 years, it feels like, as far as dominating or even more. Larson has been really good in this year in this package. Probably been the fastest car
Yeah.
overall, and he starts on the pole, so he's going to lead. Is there a competition caution? I've not seen.
I haven't seen that come up from Bob here whatsoever. If it is, it's probably laps 25 to 30, I would think, but I have not seen anything as of yet. I don't think so, just because they had practice and qualifying. Everything went smoothly there, so I don't think there will be. Correct us if
Yeah,
I'm wrong in chat there, everyone, if you did see something.
Yeah, I don't see any way that Larson doesn't lead to the competition caution. And then if he can stay out front, I mean, most of this first stage is probably going to be his. So I don't see much way around that. Ricky Stenhouse is not going to lead over him early. And Chase is not, he's starting third. He's not going to push unless he just has a much, much faster car, which I don't think he does. I think he'll be comfortable letting him lead early on, and Byron as well, his teammate in the top four. So I don't see any way Larson's not leading early, and most of that first stage. And he has the upside to do what Kyle Busch and Truex have done here in the past. So he's definitely in the pool. Truex, though, I think he leads the second half of this race. I just think he knows the setup for when this thing cools off and he can take over then. So I guess what you need to do is find the guy who's going to lead most of the first half if you want to pair him with Truex, which I think is going to be a mixture of Larson and some other guys that we'll get to. When I started going through this pool, deciding contest selection, kind of like we were talking pre-show with if I was doing 20 max or just like a 3 max build. It became very clear that it's going to be 20 max, and try to pair a couple dominators and get that right. We've mentioned Larson and Truex being our favorite two up at the very top, but then it's really close to me between for the next two spots between Chase and Kyle Busch. I think Kyle looked really good in practice. He ran a very long run. I think he was the only guy to run a 25 lap run in qualifying, and he seemed really good. The lap times did not change very much from his 10 to 25 lap average, really. So I think he's got a good long run car. He could be the guy that comes in later in this race. I think you could pair him with Truex, though, and just hope that JGR has found something here, which they definitely have. They've dominated the race. And then Chase, man, Hendrick and Gibbs have looked like the two best teams for sure this year. Chase has been good here at Charlotte, so I think he's going to be the other guy in that range. So I'm going to try to mix and match those four as much as I can, with my favorite two being Truex and Kyle Busch.
Okay. So a couple takes here right off the bat. I'll jump into those top two. I've got a case for both. I like both. I'm right now only playing the single entry. Before I get into that, I kind of flashed over here while you were talking about contest selection. I do have that up here. So the one I like the most, the 20 max, is that $4 chrome horn. Nice payout structure in there. Is $80 to get in and max enter that at 20. That's kind of the way I really want to go today, because I really do like my player pool. I do like splitting those two drivers. But for me right now, I am entered in the $22 single entry leaderboard, the $12 single entry, and there's another leaderboard one. It must be closed here. I think it was like a $4 or $5 one. So I'm just single entry for now and just going to run in one lineup. I've got it set up. And I've got Larson in there right now. Now, like I said, you can make cases for both. So first of all, the case for Truex would be that he is absolutely dominated here. Now, when he's dominated, he had someone different as crew chief. And that's something that really stood out to me when I started looking at it now. You look at all these top fives in here: fifth, third, first, 13th, third, first, second, first. A lot of the dominator points, a lot of laps led in there. This was Cole Pern in there, and they made an excellent pair. I think the longer race really helped them as an elite group to make those changes as they went in tonight. Now, you said Truex knows the setup, and I guarantee he does. It's just a matter if he can convey that to the team to get them to set that car up. That's where the risk comes in for me. He is the elite driver. He's right up there as one of my top guys. Larson, he didn't race here last year. He was 33rd in his last Coke 600. I believe he ended up in a crash in that race in 2017, and he's only got one top five, and it was not in the Coke 600. So there's a knock against him. Now, the good side for him is that he has been absolutely dominant with this package. He was fastest in practice. He was fastest. I'm going to scroll over here quickly and look at that. He was fastest in 10 lap averages. Sorry, he was third in 1 lap average in the practice. He was first in 10 lap averages. That's awesome to see. Qualified on the pole. I think he's going to lead early. So if I had to go over and redo my DK fantasy matrix after talking this through, I'm probably going to have Larson up top here. I had him at 100. I got him at 150 now, just so he has more than Truex. I think both of them are capable of totally dominating this race. Truex, like I said, they both got a few knocks against them, but right now I've got Larson. I think he's got a little bit more, a higher floor, just because of he started on the pole, and I don't think there's a car that's going to. I don't think Ricky Stenhouse is going to challenge him. I don't think Elliott's going to get up there and challenge him. So I think he can get out and lead probably at least up. The first stage is 100 laps, so that could be 100 laps right there, or even get an 80 and some in the mid stages. But I think he's easily in for 100 plus. So he's my favorite. And then, yeah, I'm kind of with you going down to the second tier there, looking at Elliott and Busch. I like how, if I'm just going to jump over to the intermediate tier track history for this year. So we can see Truex. That was another thing I want to mention. The win at Darlington was a different package. If don't get me wrong, Darlington had a different package than Kansas, Atlanta, Vegas, and Homestead earlier in the year. So Truex hasn't had a top five in 3 straight in this kind of package. I know I'm just crushing your guy here, so I'll just move on to Kyle Busch. I got some nice things to say about him. 4 straight top fives in mile and a half. He won the last time with this package at Kansas, so I do like that. He does give you, with that trouble he had in qualifying 20th, he does give you some place differential in there as well. So if you go look at the fantasy matrix, I haven't even given him any laps led here yet, and he can hit 6x with about a second place finish. So if you started to give him and think he leads any laps at all, he's definitely got that upside in there for 7, 8, even 9x if you feel he can be a dominator in this race. Elliott is a little bit more on the GPP side, starting third, because I think Larson, like I said, leads early. If you think Elliott can get past him early, I would go Elliott in your lineup versus Larson. Maybe pair Elliott with Truex. And in that case, I wouldn't probably go Elliott and Larson together unless you think they both can have strong cars throughout the race and both can get laps led. Because these top guys that are 10K plus, you're going to need laps led, because we are looking for, if you're playing tournaments, definitely you're going to need the laps led. You're going to need those dominator points, because like I said, you're going to need 400 plus DK points and like 8 to 9x out of your lineup. So definitely narrow it down and pick your favorite dominators out of there to get, like Dane said, get your early and your late dominators. I'm just going to check and see, now that we're talking about the top tier, anyone got any questions on that top tier? I know Zen Runner mentioned Truex in this package hasn't been great in the mile and a half this year. That's kind of what I mentioned, but I think experience, the veteran drivers at this racetrack, I think, have a little bit of an edge. Even if Truex doesn't have, this will be his second, because I don't remember his name, his crew chief for this year, but he had him for the Coke 600 last year, all of the 2020 season.
Small,
So,
James Small.
yes. So this will be his second Coke 600 here. This will be his second season with Truex as well. So I still love Truex, but he would be second to Larson for me. So kind of moving down. Oh, thoughts on Byron. Yeah, so that kind of takes us down into that next tier. And this was a tough one for me too, because I singled out, first of all, and really narrowed down that top tier to those 4 drivers. And then going down, I mean, if you're going with a build with the stars and scrubs, you're going to be going down into the 6 and 7K range. So this mid range may get looked over a little bit. I think William Byron is an excellent play I have him as I think he's maybe top 6 in my rankings on the sheet. But if we look at his practices or practice, he was top 10 in practice, second behind Larson in 10 lap averages. So it looks like he's got a really good long run car. Um, Fourth in qualifying. Now, you may look at his Coke 600 last year and see that 21st, 39th the year before, but that 21st last year, I believe he was running inside the top 5 when he spun out. And he also had an average finish during that race, or an average finish, an average run during that race inside the top 10 as well. I believe he was third best in average run during the Coke 600 last year. So he did have a lot of speed. So did Bowman. He ended up getting wrecked. Like they finished 20th, 21st. Bowman lasted right until that final restart. And then I think he spun out as they were kind of crossing the checkered flag, I believe. But both of those Chevy cars had speed. So I think the Chevys may come a little bit under owned because of the Toyotas, first of all. Kyle Larson then at the top. I know he's in a Chevy, but still, I think he's going to have a little bit more ownership. And then, like I said, you're going to try and pair two guys 97, even 10K and up. This group's going to be overlooked, and Byron is definitely my favorite in that range. Do you like Byron, Dane? And is there anyone else kind of in this let's say mid 8K to 9,700 at Kozlowski that you really like?
Yeah, I really like Byron, and the main reason is like you were talking about the practice. If you look at how much he kind of fell off in his 5, 10, and 15 lap average, 5 lap, he was 30.201. 10 lap, you said he was second to Larson. He was 30.25. And then he only fell off 400ths of a second to 30.291 on his 15 lap average. And the 15 was the best of the cars that did run. So, man, he's I think he might be the scariest guy to Larson out front early in this race. We've seen him do it early on, be the fastest car previously this year. So I think Byron really likes this place and can really find with the speed that he's got. I think could be your third dominator if you can find a way to build with 3 or 2 up top and then him, or you can just take one from up top and then Byron and then fill out in the mid range for sure.
Yeah, Byron is one of only 3 drivers, Kyle Busch and Martin Truex Jr., the other ones, who have finished top 10 in all 5 mile-and-a-half races this year. It's been absolutely incredible. He's even shown some dominator. He led 25 laps at Las Vegas and 102 at Homestead when he won that race. He started 31st, so he really crushed the DK points. That really brought his average up in that one. He ended up getting dominator and place differential. But I'm with you. He's got speed. That car has been fast all year on the intermediate tracks, especially. So I think he can definitely challenge for that top spot. And I think, if you wanted to go Chevy and go like Elliott Byron together, I think that's a good combo that doesn't take you into those 11K guys, that leaves you so you don't have to really go down and grab those 5K guys. But I think you can still pair Byron with Larson as well if you really want to go those Chevys. And this is where 20 Maxes would really work out for me, is I would almost run Byron in probably 2 or 3 lineups with Larson, Truex, and Elliott. Like I could probably make half of my 20 max lineups right there and have 50% exposure to Byron with those guys, and then just kind of tweak that exposure near the end. I definitely like that build. So Byron is definitely my favorite. It sounds like he's your favorite in this range as well. I think he's probably going to. I don't. Do you think people will be scared that he's starting fourth and he may not get the dominator points? Do you think his ownership will be down a bit versus those other guys, or do you think people will just see that 9,200 price tag, those practice speeds, and his intermediate average this year?
I'm muted. I would think he's going to be somewhere around 20%, but
Yeah.
it could come in lower for sure. It's just the only problem is, who else do you really, really like in this range? I mean, I think some of these other guys are going to be very low owned, but I just don't like what I've seen out of them this year, really. Brad and Joey and Blaney, that team has been okay, but nothing that you really think they could have a dominator come out of there over either Hendrick or Joe Gibbs. I wouldn't think so. I think Byron will probably be the most popular. It's interesting what people are going to do with Logano under 9,000 starting 16th, but I don't know if I can even go there. I just don't like the way what they've been doing this year as a team, really. But and Harvick's kind of the same way. I don't think I can pay 10,000 for him.
Mm-mm.
When you can pay 10-2 for Kyle, 10-5 for Chase, or drop down to Byron. Bowman is another one of the Hendrick cars, but I just don't know. I don't know what people will do with him. He wasn't strong as the other ones in practice, but obviously he does have the potential to dominate some of this race too. I'm not sure that I'll get there either. How do you feel about Bowman? He didn't run even a 10 lap average in practice though.
No, and going just before I get into Bowman here, you had mentioned the team Penske struggling this year. They're struggling on these mile and a halves.
Yeah.
As you can see here, I've got it up here on the mile and a half page. Blaney has a win, 2 top 5s, 3 top 10s. So he's been the best of the bunch, and he actually has an 8.6 average run. So out of those three, Blaney is definitely my favorite. I think he's going to come in under owned because of the Byron's in there, and then the guys above, and then the guys below. So Blaney's my favorite. He's probably the only one of that group that I'm going to have exposure to. When it comes to Keselowski, he's only got 2 top 10s. Logano's only got one. Out of 5 intermediate races, those two drivers only have 3 combined. Blaney has the same amount as those 2 combined. That just blows my mind. How they've struggled on these mile and a half, Keselowski and Logano especially. I think Logano is also he's this is what becomes a full fade for me on him is that struggling on the mile and a halves combined with his, for at least for me, his projected ownership at this price tag under 9K and a starting position of 16th and his, what do we got here, last 5 races. When we just look at overall current form, he's coming off 2 top 5s, but they were at Dover and a road course. So I think because of the form, people are going, and the price, people are going to be higher owned on him, and that makes him a fade. I'd rather pay up for his teammate Blaney. Now going over to Bowman, looking at his practice speeds here, that's just, he's starting 7th, so he qualified 7th. He was 2nd in first practice, 7th in 10, or sorry, didn't have a 10 lap average. So that is a little bit concerning, seeing that out of some of these top cars that maybe didn't run 10 lap averages means they were either one. And I didn't get to see all of it. I had some of it on mute because I was working on baseball stuff as well. But I think some of them were doing a lot of adjustments in and out of the garage. Like they weren't making those 10 lap runs because they were just constantly making adjustments on the car. It appears they made some pretty good adjustments though for Bowman because he did come out and qualify 2nd. Whether that's going to turn into issues, that it could be good off the start. He could be running top 10, top 5 for the opening stage or portion of the stage, but is he going to have the long run car if we see a lot of green flag um, laps out there? So I'm kind of a little bit lower on him. And in this range, like I said, I'm really looking at Byron and Blaney. And then it kind of goes down into that next range. I'm just going to check on, yeah, okay, we had answered Liz's question on Blaney.
Yeah,
If
if you
he's,
look at Logano, just his practice times will tell you every reason of why I'm fading.
yeah,
He was the fastest on 5 lap average. And then he had massive fall off. I mean,
yes,
he lost 3/10 of a second to his 10 lap average, and then he lost another over a tenth more on his 15 lap average. I mean, he was the fastest on 5, and then once he got to 10, he was behind pretty much everybody by over a tenth of a second behind all the top cars. Even Kurt Busch, he was a full tenth behind him when he was almost 2/10 faster on 5 lap. So if he's got a 5 lap car, I mean, what is that? I know they'll make adjustments, but starting 16th, yeah, you might see him. If that stays true, you're going to see him jump into the top 10 pretty quick and then fall back to the back of the top 10. And I don't think riding there and finishing around 10th, 8th to 10th is going to get it done for us.
no, yeah, exactly. We, like I said, going back to it over and over again. When it comes down to math, we're going to need 400 to 450 points to win a GPP. We're going to need 350 to 400, I think, to get in to the money and at least kind of double up or triple up. So if you're playing GPP, I mean, if you're playing cash games, you can play a little bit more conservative. But I really, really looking at the matrix and these possibilities and breaking it down extra this week. And that's what really brought me to Byron because I think he can lead some laps. Now going down even further, now that we're kind of went over Logano and our fade, Bell just hasn't been there for me either. talking about him. Kurt Busch was an interesting one. He's got a lot of top tens here at Charlotte, including the Coca Cola 600. He's got top tens in 5 straight. I don't think a top 10 is going to get it done for him. I don't see him leading any laps, first of all. And he's just a little bit too high priced. So right now for 6X, we need 50 points out of him. With no laps led, that's a third place finish, Dane. For him to hit 7X, he needs to win the race and lead laps. So to hit that 8, 9X, he needs to be a dominator. I don't see that happening. I can't go to Kurt Busch today. He'd have to be starting about 20th for me to have him in my player pool.
I think I will have a sprinkle of him. But yeah, like you said, there's other guys around him and below that I think have more upside for less. Reddick is one. He looked pretty good in practice as well. That team did, him and Austin Dillon. He's ran well here in the past, 2 top 15s last year. 8,200 is fine for him. I think that's a GPP play. Definitely not a cash or probably not even single entry unless I just fall there with my last spot. But I do like Reddick. You mentioned Custer. I'll leave him to you as a guy that was in race trim, but I'm not super high on him starting 23rd, but I'll see if you have any different take on that. Austin Dillon is 7,700. Starting 6th is not very enticing, but if he finishes top 10, I think I've not looked at the matrix, but I would think a top 10 would be fine for him at 7,700. And I think he does have the upside for like a 5th place finish in there possible. Almirola is interesting just where he's starting, but man, he has been horrific this year. Honestly, I don't think I can go heavy on him anytime, no matter where he's starting right now. And then Matty D is one of my favorite ones, starting 22nd at 7,500. He's not been great here in the past, but last year in this car, he was 15th and 18th, which is not horrible. He was not bad in practice either. He did run a 10-lap average or a 10-lap run. So Matty D at 75 is one that I'll be going to. Stenhouse is a definite fade. Yep. Eric Jones, okay. He looked decent early in practice, I believe, but I think he fell off. I was pulling that up. Let's see.
Yeah, so going back to, you had mentioned Austin Dillon. I am off Dillon. Starting 6th, he needs to be a dominator, even at 7,700. To hit 5X, that's 39 points. That is a 5th place finish. I think that's his upside, is a 5th. I don't know if 5X can get you there, and that kind of it could. Now, one thing that it could do, this could be a race where we see that one dominator that gets 40% of the total DK points out of the 6-driver lineup, like we've seen when Kyle Busch and Martin Truex Jr. absolutely dominated. That's when we get 10X, 11X, 12X. Okay, so they were 10,000. Shit, that's now they're 20X. So when you're getting a lot of dominators, so you get 2 guys that lead 150 plus laps, the chances, if you have both of them in your lineup, you do not need 5X out of those other drivers. You need a combined 8 to 9X to win the tournament. So if 2 guys are both getting 12, you can handle 4X. So you really just need to find the guys in that scenario. When you do your build, do you feel that 2 drivers are going to dominate, let's say 80 to 90% of the laps? If you do, pick those drivers in your lineup. Then you don't really need to target the 7, 8X for your other guys in your lineup. You can be real conservative. Look for those Austin Dillons who you feel is comfortable. Get in the top 10 at 7,700. He may only get you 4X, but that's fine because those other guys are getting you, 10 to 12, even, in certain circumstances, 15X on your lineup. So it really depends on how you feel it's going to play out with your 6 drivers. You always got to be thinking of that when you're constructing, or you're just kind of blindly throwing drivers in your lineup and hoping they, everything works out. Whereas if you at least have a plan, that's where building 20 lineups, and you can build 5 core lineups, just changing in 1 or 2 pieces with that kind of analysis and building that kind of core. But that's how I build my 3 or 4 driver cores, is I really look at, if it's a place differential like Talladega or Daytona, I'll look at that. But this is a dominator race, so I want to get at least the 2 top dominators in my lineup and where they come from, and then that really plays out how we go and build the rest of our lineup. So off of that,
yeah, I really like that. Let me finish up on that real quick because it relates back to a few weeks ago when on the lineup that I had that was second in the 20 max a few weeks ago. It had Larson and Truex. Truex led most all of the race. Larson started 14th and finished second. Even though he was the highest priced, he had that place differential. But even if those two would have split some of the leading in the race, if you look at the rest of the lineup, it was kind of that mid-range that they didn't finish much farther than where they started. So
Mm-hmm.
guys this week that you'd think Reddick, Dillon,
Kurt, probably.
even Kurt Busch, yeah. I mean, it had Eric Jones starting 26th, finished 18th. Chastain starting 18th, finished 15th. Buescher started 11th, finished 9th. It's kind of all in that range. So if you think it's going to be a 1 to 2 dominator day, or you're building a lineup that has two main dominators that you think will lead almost all the race, then yeah, you can filter those guys in just like you were saying.
Yep. And it all exactly. So when we talk about hitting 5x as kind of a baseline almost every week, that's kind of what we talk about. That's just like your baseline for your lineup, for your overall lineup. Not you don't need that out of each driver. Not always is it ever, almost never is it going to work out to be like a balanced. They're all going to hit like the same value to give you that total. You're going to have two or three that are, whether it be super place differential or the dominators. You're going to have two or three drivers in your lineup that make up a lot more percentage of the points, and then you're just kind of picking those lower guys. So exactly when you start scrolling down into, let's say, the 7,500 and below range, we don't always need that top upside. Now, we definitely can get that. Now, I had up in my notes, of course, I shut that off, this race last year where we didn't have the one outstanding dominator. Truex was 10-6. Come on, computer. Had some really good data on there. It was a little bit more of a balanced lineup, and I believe all the drivers in the lineup had, almost got it up here. If I didn't have 14 tabs going at once, this would be a lot faster. Okay, so Truex put up 8.5x. McDowell at 5,600 give you 6.3. Custer was 64 and give us 7.6x. Blaney 8.6, Bowman 9x, and Elliott 8x. So it was pretty darn consistent across the board. But if I didn't break it down for those other races where there was dominators, but like I said, Truex and Kyle Busch in those two races were like 15 to 18x. So yeah, just that's what we're talking about when we're looking at the matrix. If you want to break it down more, hit us up in chat for sure. We can definitely go over how we use that to kind of calculate and come up with our player pools for our single entry or GPP, the bigger guaranteed prize pool lineups. Okay, so Almirola is someone you mentioned absolutely had the worst luck this entire year. I like him starting 31st. I think he gives us a pretty nice floor if he doesn't crash. I know we can't project crashes, and he's had nothing but bad luck. So I'm just going off the floor, projecting that everything just goes smooth and I'm not going to even say awesome. Just goes smooth and he doesn't crash. He makes it to the end of the race. We need like 40 points gives us 5x. That's a 17th place finish. I think that's a solid floor right there at 5x. I think he's got upside. If he does have a good race, 7x gives him is 55 points. That's only a 10th place finish. 0 laps led, 0 dominator points. I think Almirola, he's in a car that's got top 10 potential. 55 points gives you 7x. I think he could be 5th to 10th if everything goes right and give you that 8 to 10x. So he's definitely in my player pool. It is really scary AF, but I'm definitely got way more of him than anyone else in this range. Even more than DeBenedetto. I do like him. Fading Ricky, just like you talked about. Eric Jones, I don't mind starting 19th. I think he's another guy that gives you a solid floor. I don't think there's a lot of upside in the equipment that he's in, but he's a solid value play. I think he's going to give you like 5x is 36 points. That's a 13th place finish. I think that's kind of like his. I don't see him getting 10th anything better than the 13th. So we're not looking at a whole lot of upside out of him either. One guy I wanted to ask you about, he didn't qualify well. Things haven't really looked good the whole weekend, but he's been awesome all year, is Chris Buescher. He's definitely probably my favorite guy down here. I'm going to be overweight. He could crush me today, but we need 40 points out of him gives us 6x, and that's a 15th place finish. If we go look at how he's done on the intermediates this year alone, he's got 3 top 5s and finished inside the top 20 in all of them, 3 straight top 10s on the 1.5 miles and 14th at Vegas before that, 19th at Homestead. So he's gotten better on these 1.5 miles all year. What do you think about him? Like, is he going to be like 40% owned?
Yeah.
Awesome.
he, him and Newman are definitely my favorites, but they're everybody's favorites too. So I'm definitely going to have quite a bit of exposure though, because man, those guys are really underpriced for where they're starting or starting farther back for where they're, however you want to word that.
Yep.
They're definitely some of the best values of the week down here. Chastain's been a guy that I've really liked playing recently, but man, I don't know. Starting 10th is, I
That's
don't think
tough.
he's got a top 10 car, honestly. I think he's got a top maybe 15.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know that that's going to get it done when you have Buescher sitting right behind him. I mean, you would have to have a couple of these guys like Buescher and Newman, or at least one of them have trouble in this race for him or for Chastain or Suarez to beat them, I think.
Yep.
And then you got guys just below them too that could potentially outscore those guys as well. Briscoe, he's been almost like Almirola with some of the luck he's had, I feel, recently.
He's in a good car.
Yeah, and then Priest, I like him at 6,000, starting 28th. I think that's a pretty good spot for him. He's finished 23rd and 24th last year here. I was trying to pull up his practice averages because Stenhouse was really good, obviously, in practice. And I'm scrolling.
Priest was, I see 22nd in 10 lap. So that, I mean, that's not bad. McDowell was 17th. Those are two guys kind of in that area.
Yeah. Yeah. So McDowell is another guy too that I like in that range. And then the bottom that I would go, and we've kind of said the same thing. I feel like on every show we've done, I've liked this guy. Is Alfredo starting 29th again. And he looked decent in practice. Didn't have a ton of fall off over the 5, 10, 15 lap average. Obviously, he's not as fast as these other guys, but what we need from him is a top 20 to really pay off. If he gets 22nd, 23rd, so be it. I mean, I'll take it. It's not going to kill you, I don't think. If you can get some of the other guys that have place differential and nail the dominators, I think that would still work out. But he really only fell off from 5 to 15 lap average, not even a full tenth of a second over that time. So I think that's pretty encouraging to see from him. Obviously, he's not ran in the Cup Series here. And I would like to see what that team did last year with John Hunter. I can't remember exactly, but maybe that's something to look at here from last year. But
last year's
I was
race,
pretty encouraged by the practice time.
John Hunter was in that, right, last year?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So he was started 25th, finished 17th, average run of 21st. So, I mean, he wasn't.
I'll take that.
Exactly. Like that's absolutely solid. I would definitely take that. He had 3 fast laps, so you're almost going to get 1 or 2 fast laps out of all these guys. So I'm not really looking at that, but exactly. Started 25th, ran around 21st all day, and then ended up 17th at the end. There were a couple wrecks or whatever, like we talked about. So he probably gained 3 or 4 spots because of that, but we can't project that. Or so running. That's why I really like looking at the average run. Takes out kind of some of that data and some of that cloudy stuff in there. If there's a lot of wrecks, if you don't know that there's wrecks, some of this data can be, oh wow, that's he had an average run. So that's why I definitely peek at that. So I'm with you on Alfredo. I wasn't before, so that's the guy. Every show you get me on one guy, he's going to be the value guy. I'll go way down to that 5,500 range and starting 29th. We would be joyful with a 17th place finish. Like you said, I'll take a 25th place finish out of him. On the matrix, I didn't check that out. Let's just go Alfredo here.
There's some so with the Buescher and Newman deal being the chalk, I think I'm going to try to make at least a set of my 20 max to not include one of the two in a lineup. I'll definitely make sure I have some because they could definitely end up being the best values. But maybe if you play both of them, you go a little off the board at the top.
Yes.
Be a little different there, but I'm definitely going to make it a point to not play both of them in a ton of lineups, just because it's going to be so chalky. And like I was saying earlier, if you play Larson and Truex up top, everybody's going to go down. If they do play Alfredo, I don't think he'll be super popular, but if they do play Alfredo, then you have 7,300 left over. So falls right in that range. If you play Buescher, Newman, Alfredo with the top two guys, and then fill in that last spot in the mid range, you're not going to be unique. So
No.
if you want to do it. But that's not the way I'm going to go. I'm not going to be playing both of them together in a lot of lineups.
That makes a lot of sense, and that's something we haven't talked about. I did have on my list. When you're looking at these, especially the value guys, when you're looking at the chalk value guys, which, to me at least looks this. I agree with you that Buescher, Newman, even Briscoe are going to be those chalky guys. I don't want, like you said, if I'm building 20 lineups, I only want two of them together. Probably, let's say 20%, 25% of those overall lineups. Do I want to cross them up, because you could. That's where you can make. That's where you can really go ahead and make your leverage for GPP, is go off the board with one of them, or like you said, if you do combine two of them together, Newman and Briscoe or Newman and Buescher or whatever, don't go with your chalk guys in the top. This is where you make your pivots now off the top guys. You go Blaney if you think he's lower owned, or Harvick if you think he can be a low owned dominator. This is where you can be different at the top. But don't go with your chalk at the top and chalk at the bottom. Unless it's cash games, don't worry about it. But for GPPs, generally going with that route isn't going to work out very often. There's just so much variance in NASCAR. It's a wonderful sport to really narrow down who the highest owned guys are going to be and pivot off of them, especially the value guys like we talked about, because the variance in these guys down here in this lesser equipment, not as good at drivers, is a lot higher than your top guys. Making a pivot off of Elliott to Truex or Truex to Elliott may only be a difference of a couple of points. 10 points, 5 points, really not a big game changer at the end of the day. Whereas your pivot down here in the bottom can be huge and massive. So that's definitely a range when we really narrow these down. Yes, I love Buescher, Newman, and Briscoe, but like that's just an amazing point. Is don't put all three of them together, especially, and really limit how many times you put two or three of them. I know that can be tough, but just try and find your lower owned pivots off of those guys. We kind of went over who we think is going to be high owned and who's going to be lower owned here. But if you got questions, definitely hit us up in chat. We still got, looks like, a little over 2 hours until we get to lineup blocks. We got a lot of time, so if you got questions, bring it in. McDowell pivot, yes, I definitely like the McDowell pivot. I don't have him highlighted on the sheet right now, but like I said, he put up a nice top 20 long run. What's his 5 and 15 and 20 lap averages look like? Do you still have that up?
Yeah, he did a 10 lap average. It looks pretty good as far as where he compares to other guys in the price range, at least.
Yeah.
He fell off, looks like a tenth from 5 to 10 lap, but his 10 lap was still better than it was better than Buescher. It was better than LaJoy, Priest by quite a bit.
Awesome.
A little better than Alfredo as well. So yeah, I do like the McDowell pivot there. Surely he's not super high owned at all.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think anyone outside those three guys is going to be like at least half ownership.
Yeah, I see JP mentioned that Alfredo probably 22%. I could see that. I think he actually will end up a little lower. I would think in the 15 range is what I would project for him. And then Liz mentioned LaJoy. I was not very big on LaJoy. I don't know if you have a different take, but he would be the lower owned guy of all these guys down here. But his practice times do not look very good at all. I mean, he was 0.3 of a second on 10 lap average behind McDowell, which is pretty brutal. But he was very similar to Priest. So if the thing with Priest is, I think that you got to play that maybe that team has found something. I mean, and they'll get it together. Priest has ran decent here in the past. So I'm going to fade LaJoy, I believe, but do you have a different take?
Yeah, I'm just going to share my screen and go back to the sheet here and show why I am not playing LaJoy. Let's go there. Okay, we're back up on the sheet here. So I wanted to go look at season data. Oh, I actually had it loaded up here in the sheet. Give me 2 seconds here. I'll slide this over so everyone can see. And I'm looking at the intermediate track history this year is what I was peeking at. He's got an average finish in the 5 races of 30.2, zero top 20s, whereas you have McDowell right above him. He's got 4 top 20s in 5 races on these mile and a half this year. He's got a top 10, 16.4 average finish, so 14 spots better. And then even going and backing that up, looking at the average run, LaJoy's a 27.2, McDowell's a 19.2, even Priest 24, Briscoe 23, Newman 17.6. All these guys are kind of in the 20 range, where McDowell's kind of back in that 30. Even Alfredo, 26 average run and 24.8 average finish. So that's really what took me off LaJoy. Before I even looked at practice times, was just how he's been running on these mile and a half, and it's been pretty ugly this year. And he has had the worst 10 lap average out of like all these guys down in this range. I think he was dead last in 10 lap averages, outside of like James Davidson and David Starr down here at the bottom. So I'm off of him. I'm on Alfredo with you now that we've kind of looked through everything. A little bit less of Priest. So if I had to rank the value guys, which that's usually what a couple people are looking for, let's
Yeah.
go below 7K. It would be Buescher for me. Buescher, Newman, Briscoe, obviously the three chalk guys, and then I like, just because of price, I like going down to Alfredo, and then McDowell, and then Priest. I actually have Priest last out of those six if we're going to rank those six.
Yeah, my top three owned in my pool will definitely be Buescher, Newman. But remember, I'm going to limit how much together. And then Alfredo is going to be my third highest owned of the value guys. And then McDowell and Briscoe and Priest are all probably going to be close in my pool. I'm planning to fade Suarez, but I do like the way that car is running. His practice times look really good as well, but man, he's starting ninth. I don't think I can get
Oh,
there. And he's higher priced than Newman, Briscoe, Priest, all those guys. If he
he'll be
was
less than
priced
1%.
with the starting position in mind, then I could do it. But no, not for me today. And Chastain's going to be a fade for me as well at below 7.
Yeah, I like seeing, like, I think, would you say JP, we got on Custer projected he thinks around 3%. That's really intriguing because I wasn't getting there on Custer at all, um,
Yeah.
before. And I mean, he finished 13th here last year in that 41. Again, we had some wrecks, so we moved up a few spots. But geez, a 15th place finish out of him. But 8K seems just a little bit of a stretch. We're
Yeah.
looking for 40 points out of him. Just for, we're just looking for that 5X. I'm not looking for much more, like I said, from these guys down here, because I think we can get so much from the guys up top. I just got to find here. I had to scroll up. I wasn't even on the right spot. So yeah,
He would definitely be the pivot to Almirola, who's probably going to be five
yep.
times or six times that ownership in the same equipment. Pretty much the exact same price, 8 spots difference for 6 times probably the ownership. I mean, I would think Almirola is going to be 25, 30. Is what I would
I'm on
think.
Custer now. I'm on Custer.
Yeah, I'll have a sprinkle for sure. He's not going to be like a single entry guy or anything, but
13th.
I'll probably make sure I get overweight 15%, 3 of 20 lineups or something.
Well, 13th place finish gets him 5X. Like that, I think totally that car, that equipment is
Yeah.
10th to 15th place equipment for sure. So I'll take 5X out of him. If he can get to 5X at 2 to 5% own, I think you're doing great, especially if Almirola continues his, he may look good early and say he crashes in this anytime or has a penalty or whatever and only finishes like 25th and back. For them to have the same amount would be a 17th. So if Custer finishes 13th and gets his 5X, and Almirola finishes outside of 17th, that's a good pivot, is the way I'm looking at it right now. That's the same 40 points as 17th and 13th. Um,
Yeah.
so that's the way, that's not that big a difference really in the same equipment. So I love that pivot. I absolutely love that pivot. I am now on board with Custer, at that lower ownership. Like you said, probably five
Yeah. Thanks
times
for
less
pointing that
ownership.
out, JP. That's a great
JP, you're the
catch there
man.
for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I don't know where you're getting your projections from, but I definitely agree with, looking at the guys around him and the possible ownership that Busher, Newman, and even Briscoe are going to take up being cheaper. I totally agree with that mid range being just super low owned. And if we can get 5x out of one of those guys and 8 to 10x out of our top guys, we can definitely deal with 5x. And I think he's probably got 6x, maybe even 6.5x upside. So, excuse me. I love that call. All right. I don't think we missed any other questions on here. Do you have any other questions out there, world? Let us know. We're going to wrap things up here. I am just going to open my betting site here and see if I can grab any nice value outrights or any outrights whatsoever here today. I do think it's one of the top guys that we see, so I'm not going to be going too far down the board, but I'm just going to bring it up and see what we got for prices here. Wait to see if we
Pull
get
it
any
up
other
too.
questions.
Sometimes I like some of the matchups. I know
Mhm.
last year I've not dabbled much in that this year, but I know last year I did quite a bit. If I can get anything to load, that would be great.
On my cool bet, they only got race winner, which drives me nuts. They don't even have top five, top 10 or anything. But I did put some money on. Geez, was this Bet 365 as well, just to kind of get some added stuff like cool bet. It's nice. It's Canadian. It makes it real easy for my money transfers and stuff. And I really like the way the site runs, but it's just really limited in what you can do. Like I know you use like DK Sportsbook a lot. They have a lot of different cool props and stuff that you can get on all sports. I just wish they just allow us in Canada. Like it's like our border. Just like I want to come to America, Dane. I do want to come see sports. Although Montreal Canadiens, the first Canada finally had some fans, 2,500 of them, and it was in Montreal on the other side of the country. But there were fans in Canada watching a professional sport, so I was pretty happy to see that last night. All right,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think my favorite value as far as race winner is not too far off the board, but Kyle Busch,
Mm-hmm.
8 to 1, is pretty enticing.
You
I
got 8 to
believe.
1, hey?
Yeah,
Mine's just loading now. I got 7 to 1 on Kyle, so yeah, I like that 8 to 1.
maybe Byron at 12 too would be
He
interesting.
That's as deep as I'm going. Is Byron? Oh,
Yeah,
Keselowski. I mean, Keselowski's the same number. Blaney's the same number for me. I think all of them can win, but Byron's my favorite, like we talked about before. Just kind of the way he's been on the mile and a half this year. Um, the way he ran here at the Coke 600 last year, but the finish doesn't show it, but the average run position definitely did. He was a top three car, and that includes those final laps where he wasn't on the track. So that's factored in there as well, plus his practice times. So I definitely like Byron 12 to 1. That's going to be one of my bets. And then if I had to bet one of the top guys, Truex is third on the board here. It goes Larson, Elliott, and then
yeah,
Truex. So I would probably grab Truex and Byron, or if like we talked about, it's not that big a difference to go to Larson at plus 350, so not that great, 3.5 to 1. But Byron's definitely my top pick here. And then looking at some race matchups that I like, I've got Byron versus Bowman, which is pretty good. I like Byron in that instance. Busher versus Almirola, definitely like Busher there. What are some other even money ones here? Oh, this is an interesting one. I've got Kevin Harvick minus 130 versus Blaney plus 100. I personally like the.
I got that at a pick'em, so or at
Ooh,
both minus 115. So
boom, Blaney it is. I'm locking that one in right now. Another interesting one
I think one
is
I like is I can't really get to Suarez in DFS, but he's plus 115 against the minus 155 Ricky Stenhouse.
I was just looking at a Ricky one too. It's Kurt Busch minus 105, Stenhouse minus 125. I'll take Kurt Busch
Man,
there.
the books are loving Stenhouse.
Yeah,
What is the
they
deal?
definitely love him today, and I'm not.
Yeah, and then the last one, one thing I've kind of liked to do. You don't have to go too far off the board with is stage winners. And
Right?
if you look at the odds for stage one winner, Larson is plus 250. I think that I don't
To win
know
one stage?
the first
Oh,
stage.
just the first stage. Oh
The
wow.
first stage. I mean, he's starting out front. The only other number I kind of like in that, if you were gonna take two, but I think if you bet Larson, you just need to go in on him for the first stage and not split it. But Byron is 10-1 to win the first stage as well. So
Wow.
um, take your pick there. If you want to go in on Larson or sprinkle a little on Byron, I like that as well.
Love it. Yeah, I went with those two race matchups. I don't have a stage winner, and even Bet365 doesn't have that. I would love to bet those stages, but yeah, so I got Byron locked in as a race winner. I've got Kurt Busch over Stenhouse minus 105. I've got Blaney over who was it? Plus 100. Who are we talking about there? I locked it in and shut the site off.
Harvick,
Yes,
was it
over Harvick.
Blaney over? Yeah.
Awesome.
I'll post the ones that I lock in finally on the Slack on both Roto Pros and your Patreon as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so one more. Would you have anything on Haley? Guy mentioned punting with Haley. I'm not going any outside anyone else, but I could definitely. He's going to be super low owned, and he could surprise. And I think you only need a top 30, 25th would be ecstatic. Kind of the same thing as Alfredo. You're kind of looking at that same return. So check that out and see. Other than that,
I don't think I'm going below Alfredo in DFS for sure.
Yeah, that's kind of my bottom out there is with him, and he's going to be. I'd say Alfredo. I'd probably put him at about. If you're doing 20 max, 10% two lineups, so kind of in that 10 to 15%. So awesome. That kind of takes care of that for now. No other questions on here. I appreciate all you coming in. You threw some, one more. I see. I just popped up here. Over underweight on Keselowski. We talked about him early on. I am underweight on that whole team. Blaney's the only one on Team Penske that I am looking at, just because of we talked about their performance on the mile and a half in this package this year. Just has not been great. They've only got 3 combined top tens between Logano and Keselowski. Blaney has 3 himself. So I'm going to be 0%. So massively underweight on Keselowski today. So look for him to get. I was massively underweight on him last year at this exact same race. So seeing him slowly, watching the race for 4 to 5 hours, and him slowly make his way towards the front, lead 21 laps, and win that thing just pissed me right off. So I hope that's a little bit different this year. I'll tell you how I really feel offline, though. Yeah, again, thanks for everyone for joining. If you got any more questions, hit us up. We got Slack chat for Roto Pros. We got Slack chat for my Patreon, as well as dfsr.com. You can hit us up there or hit me up there as well if you got any questions, or on Twitter, mine at Jaeger_bombs9. And what's yours, Dane?
On his Red Stag 007.
Right on, everybody. Thanks a lot. Let's go get some green screens. Peace out.
Good luck.